How y'all doing? That's great. I woke up and left my house probably like 6:25, and it was light. It was light out, and it was warm. The spring is coming. I'm excited about that. There's not a lot to get excited about these days, but I'll take that. Anyway, it's great to see all of you. Thanks for being here. I'm Jonathan Bowles. I am the Executive Director of the Center for an Urban Future. And I know there's a lot going on, so it's really great to see so many people here, and thanks to everybody that's joining us on the live stream. In case you are not familiar with us, the Center for an Urban Future is a think tank focused on building a stronger and more equitable economy in New York and expanding economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. Building a more equitable economy is going to require a number of new policies and investments. But few things will be as important as ensuring that far more New Yorkers can access the well-paying jobs that are growing here. Now more than ever, that means tech jobs. My colleagues and I at the Center for an Urban Future have published more than half a dozen reports outlining explicit opportunities to expand access to tech careers. We've published studies about the opportunity to harness CUNY as a launchpad into tech careers and expand promising programs like CUNY 2X Tech. Studies about the need to scale up effective tech training programs, about the importance of expanding tech apprenticeships, and about the need to bolster employer-led initiatives to increase pathways into their tech roles. But while we need to do all of those things, our research at CUF has shown that policymakers will likely achieve the greatest impact at scale by equipping students in the K-12 school system with core technology skills and confidence in computing competencies. New York City took an important step in this direction with the 2015 launch of Computer Science for All. But despite some hugely positive results of CS for All, we know that additional steps are needed to expand CS for All's impact and reduce disparities that still exist in the mix of students who are enrolling in computer science classes. Today's forum will discuss exactly what policymakers and education leaders in their city can do to bolster computing education in New York and ensure that a lot more young New Yorkers build the foundational skills to succeed in an economy that is increasingly powered by tech and AI. We will specifically explore today a solution that we believe will be critical, training thousands more future teachers to integrate core computing concepts into their classrooms, and to ensure the continuation of a program that is doing just that, CUNY's Computing Integrated Teacher Education Initiative, known as CITE. Before we get to all those exciting issues, I would like to extend a very big thank you to Robin Hood and the Robin Hood Learning and Technology Fund for making today's event possible. Amber, and to all your colleagues, thanks so much for this support. And I should say not just for supporting today's event and this conversation, but also for supporting ongoing research and a couple of reports that we're going to be releasing in the coming months on how to expand and improve computing education in New York. The first one of which will be out in just the next month or two, which will shine a spotlight on the hugely promising CITE initiative. Thanks also to all of our speakers, including City Council Education Committee Chair Rita Joseph, who will be doing a fireside chat with Eli in a little bit. And also many thanks to my amazing team at the Center for an Urban Future. And if I can give them a really big applause for all the work that they do. So speaking of CUF staff, let me now turn things over to my colleague Eli Dvorkin, who I think you all know is one of the very best moderators in all of New York City and one of the sharpest policy minds in our city as well. So Eli, in the first panel, if you could come on up and get things started. Thank you.
Well, I hope, is this thing on? There we go. I hope I don't mess this up after that warm welcome. But thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you to our amazing panelists for taking the time. I'm Eli Dvorkin, Editorial and Policy Director at Center for an Urban Future. Let me briefly mention who I'm joined by today on the stage. Their full bios are in your programs. If you scan that QR code, you can read about everybody. But let me just mention briefly who I'm here with, and then we'll get right into the conversation. And I'll mention for everybody here and for the 100, I think, plus folks that are tuned into the live stream as well, we will take questions as part of the panel. So think of them as you do. We'll get to you guys during the at the end of the panel. And for folks that are online, feel free to type your questions into the chat, and my colleagues will share some of your questions online as well. So briefly, let me mention who we're joined by today. We are here today with Melanie Mack, the Chief of Student Pathways at New York City Public Schools, Amber Oliver, Managing Director of the Robin Hood Learning and Technology Fund, Sarah Vogel, who is the Director of Computing Integrated Teacher Education at CUNY, Michelle Ortiz, who's a 5th grade teacher at Samara Community School in the Bronx, and also an alum of Lehman College and the CITE program there, and Ron Summers, the Chief Impact Officer of Mouse and the former Executive Director of Computer Science Education for New York City Public Schools. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. So I'm so excited for today's conversation for a lot of reasons, but in part because it strikes me that we all could use some good news. And, you know, yes, maybe the fact that it was light at 6:15 is one of those things. But I think another one of those things is the amazing progress that we've been making in New York City around computing education in particular. And for all of us at the Center for an Urban Future, it feels incredibly urgent, not least of which because no part of the city's economy has added more middle and high wage jobs over the past 15 years than tech. You know, the tech sector has more than doubled the number of jobs in New York City in that time. You know, and we've seen increasingly that the new middle-class jobs in New York City are tech-powered or tech-enabled, whether that's in the tech sector or in healthcare, finance, or, you know, across the city's economy. But at the same time, I know I started with the good news, at the same time, we still see we have a long way to go to create a tech sector that looks like New York City. You know, 1 in 5 workers in the tech sector is Black or Hispanic today. But Black and Hispanic New Yorkers make up 43% of the workforce. You know, we've got a big disparity there. And I guess I would also add, we see that those disparities don't just start with hiring. You know, they exist at CUNY when you look at who's enrolled in CUNY's computer science programs. And I say this often, but CUNY looks like New York City in every possible way. But computer science majors at CUNY, not so much. You know, still disproportionately likely to be men and white and Asian men in particular. So where do those disparities start to form? Clearly before, you know, freshman year at CUNY. I want to ask all of you about that question, where we see those disparities beginning in our education system or even earlier. Help us understand what's at stake for New York right now when it comes to closing this tech opportunity gap or these gaps that exist in the workforce and in our society more broadly. Why is this so important for policymakers to pay attention to care about this issue? Maybe we start there and then we can start to dig into why this gap exists in the first place. But I'd love any of you that want to jump in on why is this so important for New York City right now?
I can start us out if I can get the microphone right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you. I think that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I helped found the Academy for Software Engineering some years back, which was the city's first limited unscreened high school that was offering 4 years of computer science education. And I saw in my incoming 9th graders each year a real difference between the students who'd had exposure and access to computer science education K to 8, whether that was through an after-school program, a really great math teacher, a school that really understood and offered computer science education. But this was before CS for All was launched citywide, and we had an ecosystem that did not yet have sort of the infrastructure in our K-12 system, our higher ed system, our sort of nonprofit, partners, our curriculum providers. And so it really was, folks who were sort of looking around the corner, and so many of the folks that are here in this room today who were part of the architects of this. And, if I talk to my students, many of them had formed ideas, in elementary or middle school about, where they felt they belonged, where they saw themselves, whether, learning about computer science and computational thinking was for them or not. And that's my story with my school is really just a microcosm. And When we think about the commitment that New York City Public Schools has made in the past 3 years, that ultimately we're on the hook for students' career success and their longer-term economic stability. You hear a lot from our school system right now about the importance of reading. You hear a lot about the importance of strong math skills. And then there's also a strong commitment to students' pathways. And part of that is the pre-K to 8 work of students building these tech skills, computational thinking and early computer science concepts. As early as pre-K, it can happen. I was at the Jacob Blackwell School with one of our team members, Tunisia Mitchell, a couple of months ago, and was like amazed to sit on the carpet with kindergartners who are already learning a number of concepts around sequencing. And so I do think that there's a number of issues here that I'm sure my colleagues will expand on. But we do really need to think about this as foundational literacy. Just like my 8-year-old is in 3rd grade at PS 222, and she's really forming the building blocks of reading right now. We're paving the way for a future where we think the same way about these computer science skills, and that they do need to start right away, so that in K-8 students develop a strong foundation that allows them to take advantage of some really incredible pathways in tech that we've built and expanded over the past 3 years in particular, and see that the largest growth in high school tech pathways that our principals, our students, our communities are asking for. But we can really accelerate students at the high school level if they've had access all throughout K-8 and opportunities to see themselves, to practice these skills, to build confidence, to build awareness, and that's what we hope to continue to get better and better at.
Avery, go for it if you want. Yeah, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. Happy to be here. I guess helpful maybe to also start with a little bit about me. So as Eli mentioned, I'm the managing director of the Robin Hood Learning and Technology Fund, and we're a co-created fund with Robin Hood, Overdeck Family Foundation, and Siegel Family Endowment. And our mission really is to tap into the potential of technology to advance learning for students living in poverty in New York City, but to also catalyze change nationally. And core to that mission is ensuring that we are integrating computational thinking across the curriculum so that every single student has the opportunity to develop those computational fluencies that we think are so critical for success today. So I say that because closing the tech opportunity gap is really core to what we do. And when I was thinking about this question, I thought it might be helpful to just declare myself an unabashed tech optimist. Which is kind of important because how you're going to answer this question, I think, is going to be informed by whether or not you think, like I do, that the ubiquity and power of technology actually has the power to bring really unprecedented opportunity to students. You can really come at it from, as we know, I think there's a debate on how the raging right now in our country about what the role of technology should be. But I say that with a caveat, which is that we're only going to achieve that vision if we have diverse voices at the table, voices that are proficient both as consumers of technology, but also as producers of technology. Because the reality is that when we don't have that, and we don't have multiple people at that proverbial table, we end up, let me say unintentionally, with some serious inequities, exacerbating those, and real harm that we do to underrepresented communities. And we've seen that. We have examples of these failures. Things like facial recognition, right, that ends up misidentifying people of color, or healthcare algorithms that misdiagnose, or in our own sector, personalized learning practices and opportunities that track students not based on their proficiency or potential, but on their race and gender. And so we know what happens when we don't have everyone at the table. It's not just that it becomes inequitable for some, but it really becomes inequitable for all. We also know that we're leaving incredible potential on the table because we've disenfranchised huge swaths of society when we do this. So I am incredibly optimistic, but also hopefully somewhat of a tech pragmatist about how I think we're going to get there. And we've seen the potential of bringing computational thinking to students all over the city, what it does for creating their problem-solving skills, their creativity skills, their ability to engage learning in across the disciplines that really helps them be more present and active learners, but also changes their mindsets about who they can be and whether or not they can engage and lead in the tech-driven world we're living today, we know that kids who don't have access to this early on end up opting out of those opportunities by middle school. Girls, kids of color, right? So if we don't do this, if we don't end up doing this equitably for all, we actually end up limiting who gets to sit at that table, which I think really does have repercussions in the long term. So I'll just say that for us, closing the tech gap isn't just about economic growth, although it does really have incredible potential and that's substantial. But it's really about creating a more equitable society where tech serves everyone because it's built by everyone. And we think there's a real opportunity right now that's unique to this, where actually if we can do this well, that we can both have societal well-being gains as well as economic gains. And that, I think, is kind of unusual and something to be excited about.
That's awesome, Amber. Thank you. Well, I'm happy for folks to jump in on just that question, but I can open it up a little bit further, too, if you'd like to say, let's also talk a little bit about some of the good news, as I alluded to. Where are we now? And, Sarah, Ron, you're welcome to jump in, Michelle, but I'm happy to hear your thoughts about why this matters. I'm also happy to hear your thoughts about where are we today. I'll just mention briefly, we went from when CS for All began, about 5% of students in any given year participating in computer science or computing education. That's tripled since then, up to almost 19%. So that sounds like a pretty impressive, accomplishment to me. But what else has changed in the past 9 years? Where were we then? Where are we now? Ron, Sarah, Michelle, if you want to talk a little bit more about why this matters, I'm happy to get your thoughts there too.
I'll follow your lead. My name is Ron Summers. I am the Chief Impact Officer at Mouse, former Executive Director of Computer Science Education at New York City Public Schools. I'll tie in why does it matter, but also progress. Why it matters, you could look at this stage and say why it matters, right? Representation matters. Being in the room matters. Having at-bats where you get the chance to be able to say, I see myself in computer science or computing education. I want to pursue computer science or AI. I am going to find a way to persist. That matters. And I bring that up because Melanie made a point about K-8. K-8 is huge for New York City public school students. I happen to grow up in a place called Jamaica, Queens. And when we think about the stat that Eli shared at the beginning, things about 100,000 new tech jobs over the last decade, and you said about, I think, 1/5 of those jobs are Black and Latino. When I look at information from the K-4 Center, right, that is actually at about 15%. Women make up about 25%. Women also make 15% less, right, than their male counterparts. And if we think about that with geographic disparities, jobs out of those 100,000, 75,000 of them are in Manhattan in the tech industry, not in Brooklyn, not in Queens, not in the Bronx, not in Staten Island. We have a really huge question to ask. Are we actually serious about making sure that equitable access is part of the fabric of New York City? Amber's right. We want students to see themselves, but also, and I'm going to touch on this later on, what is the policy? What is the infrastructure? What are the resources that we are going to make sure are happening at the state level and the city level to guarantee this is happening and hold ourselves accountable to doing so?
Thanks, Ron. Yeah. Sarah, please go ahead.
Sure. My name is Sarah Vogel. I'm with the Computing Integrated Teacher Education Initiative at CUNY. And I think something that was a major imperative for our initiative was also the fact you asked, what progress have we made? The state now has standards in this area. Mm-hmm. The state passed standards that says that all students in the state should learn computing and digital literacies because they are foundational, because of all of the reasons that the panel here has suggested. And so that means our kids get a chance to learn how to analyze a data set, to design algorithms, to program computers, to know something about the risks of technology, to know something about its impacts on their privacy, their health, their safety, to use technology to communicate, to collaborate. These are core skills that are necessary for no matter what field or pathway a student wants to get into. And so the state agrees with us now, which is exciting in 2020, that these are foundational skills, and they've really been backing up New York City CS for All in that.
I think as a 5th grade teacher, I see firsthand how the exposure to technology really sparks the curiosity and creativity in our students' young minds. And expanding access to these tech careers ensures that students, regardless of background, have the opportunity to turn that curiosity into a viable future for them and breaking the cycle of inequity, right? I remember when I first introduced the Scratch program to my third grade students, and I exposed them to the truth that less than 10% of the tech industry looks like them. They looked at me like I was crazy. They were so like surprised at that statistic, and I think that's what intrinsically motivated them to try new things on their own. By the time they were using Scratch, they were doing things that I hadn't even known. Like I hadn't even known it was possible, and they were I've never seen. I think classroom management went out the window because I didn't even have to be in the classroom. They were helping each other. They were like actually like, it was like amazing to see. And now they like know me as like, when are we gonna do Scratch again? And it's like amazing to see like what the exposure does for them. And I think that goes with why is it important and why they need to be part of that conversation as well. Like they know that they're capable. It's just really us bringing those resources to them.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Michelle. And thank you for taking time out, especially from what really is one of the most important jobs in New York City. Your job.
Yes.
And also, I got to say, shout out to your co-teacher holding it down in the Bronx today. So to be here, thank you to her. But let's dig into that a little bit more because it's so interesting and I think so important for folks in the room to understand the impact there. And what I've been part of what I've been looking at is trying to get a sense of, well, where are the gaps that still remain today, so that we can start to build a plan to help close them. And we really have seen these amazing gains. I mean, for instance, in District 23 in Brownsville and Ocean Hill, there were 17 reported students participating in computing education under a decade ago. And in 2023, there were 1,817, So you see some real change afoot. But we also know that only about 20% of the city's schools are meeting CS for All's participation and equity goals today. Basically meaning that in most schools, 4 out of 5, the demographics of the school and the demographics of the students taking computing education don't match. Girls, and in particular, Latino and Black students are still underrepresented. And that holds true across all 5 boroughs. We also see that some boroughs have done a lot more to integrate computing education. A quarter of all students in Queens last year were taking computing education, and that's only true of about 11% of students in the Bronx. So these are just sort of some of the issues that we see even after 9 years of really important progress. It sounds to me like there's a lot of consensus already on the panel about some of the pieces of that puzzle. One of them, clearly, that's now been mentioned a couple of times, is K through 8. And Michelle, you're talking about what you actually see in your students and how you can see them light up with excitement as they're introduced to these opportunities, and that they're clearly have the passion, the capacity. They need to be introduced and early and often. I want to ask all of you about how do we get there? What's the strategy? Maybe, Ron, I'll start with you. Starting going back all the way to the beginning of CS for All and then kind of what you see as the work ahead now. If the goal is to ensure that those disparities are closed, not just in the workforce, not just in higher education, not even just in our high schools, but going all the way back, what's the strategy to do it? How do you actually make that progress? Where we are now shows that progress has been made, but also that we're not where we need to be. So how do you kind of, Ron, maybe assess the progress that we've made, given the strategy? What's working and what do we need to do more of?
Really good question, Eli. And I'm going to read off a couple of stats that come from New York Research Alliance paper that they just released in February. So based on their paper, about 3,100 new teachers received training. Now, I think this is important for my answer because a new teacher is someone who has not received training, right? There are many returning teachers within the city of New York who come back for more because there is data that shows that it takes time for a teacher to first have enough confidence to just try implementation versus having mastery of implementation. And so although the stat is 3,000, if we really look at the numbers, we reached 5,000 teachers, right, for New York City public schools. The second thing I will call out is the shift that happened during the initiative. So we started off with the theory that if we train 5,000 new teachers, magically CS would happen, right? 4 million students. But towards the midpoint, we, of course, had a moment where we understood that our work was bigger than, one, an initiative, and two, than just training teachers. We needed to change our lens and our mindset and start to think about ourselves as a subject area. This is huge, because that means there are multiple strands of work that had to be taken care of, right? Everything from thinking about state policy, to what the expectations are, to what it looks like for us to do the work within the largest school district in the country. And some of the things I want to read off very quickly to answer your question, Eli, I think are going to be helpful for context, because it will give you an idea of the foundation that already exists and that we just have to pour into. So we influence state standards, right? The CS for All team had members of the team that were part of writing every single standard that existed. We had a blueprint before that, before there was guidance, that we used for New York City Public Schools to just understand what it meant to deliver CS. We also had to define what it meant to reach for all. No more were the days of just simply throwing up a banner and saying, I'm doing CS. We needed to define it from an equitable access standpoint. We needed to rethink our portfolio. In the beginning, we were the eBay of CS offerings, but we had to think about if reaching for all meant having at least one experience in K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, what did it mean for us as a servant of the community, of the system, to actually provide the right interventions, the supports, the curriculum that could help our principal get there? We had to create programming, admin programming, teacher leadership programming, CRSE programming. We had to think bigger than just simply delivering training to new teachers. We also acknowledged that we couldn't do this alone. This is why Sarah is so important. This is why Ankit Patel, who's sitting over there, is so important. Because we knew that at a certain point, training in-service teachers would not solve it. We needed pre-service teachers to solve. And I remember the day that I called Ankit Patel and said, hey, we need to make this thing real. And the deal we invested at the time, over $10 million, into what became the CITE program, because we needed help and we needed pre-service teachers who in many ways are the key to this puzzle, because what if we could actually give them the knowledge that we were trying to give in-service teachers earlier, which speeds up the access point for students. So instead of them having to go through what I talked about, I have enough confidence to teach it. I think I can teach it. Now I'm good at teaching it. What if the Michelles of the world came in and already had the foundational knowledge baked into their practice, baked into their pedagogy, so that they can do it? So a long-winded answer, right, and I'm going to wrap it up now, Eli, is I think the city of New York, right, and us as a panel have to think about CS1 as a subject area and the bigger work that's included for us to think about real equitable access happening for all 1 million public school students. It is much bigger than just teacher training, recognizing that teacher training is at the heart.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ron.
And maybe I'll build a little bit.
I was going to say, please, yeah.
On what Ron is sharing here. So in order for all kids to get CS education, we need all teachers to get CS education. And I think there are really two levers that the city can pull here. There's your in-service strategies, which Ron was alluding to, is finding those current teachers who are already in the system and saying, this is something new, something exciting, let's learn how to do it. 5,000 teachers were reached this way through CS for All. And you get amazing results this way. Melanie mentioned some of the classrooms she's visited of these amazing CS for All teachers. I've been working with an amazing colleague, Rosangela Villanueva, in the Bronx, who has done some incredible work with her third graders, practicing creating electronic music compositions based on reading that they're doing about Black jazz musicians. I mean, really incredible work has come out of the CS for All teachers that have been supported by CS for All in the years. But as important as that is, as Ron is saying, the ones you get in an in-service strategy are the ones that raise their hands first, usually. The ones that say, I want to do this. They might be predisposed to technology. They might already have some resources in that area. And so the in-service strategy comes in here and says, well, what about all those kids who aren't lucky enough to be in a class where a teacher raised their hand? And no matter what content area a teacher is doing, no matter what grade level they're in, pre-service teacher preparation reaches them. They have to go to school or do some other pathway into becoming a teacher, and that's a place where we can really influence their fundamental orientations towards what they should be teaching and who their kids are. We teach them fundamental skills like how to teach kids to read, how to meet the needs of their diverse learners, and now we can get there with computing. And I like to say good teachers are made, not born, and that's where CUNY comes in. We support the formation of novice teachers and of teachers who are coming back for a second degree. And approximately 1,500 CUNY teachers are hired by New York City PS every year. So that's incredible impact that CUNY stands to have. Ron and his team at CS for All recognized this when he made that call to Ankit. And so to help us reach every kid, we can have both of those strategies working at the same time, the in-service and the pre-service.
And keep building. I think that there's incredible progress over 9 years when you hear what Ron and Sarah have both shared, because the state standards just went into effect this year, right? And we think about all this progress of 93% of our schools at some point in those 9 years offered some sort of computer science. But in a given year, to Eli's point, 17% of our students K-12 have access to computer science education. So, when you think about the young people in your life, whether it's your children, nieces, nephews, neighbors, they're not reliably getting continuous access throughout their K-12 experience. We've made some really good strides in the past couple of years in deeper investment in the high school space, both local funding and state funding. But to get to the K-8 foundation that I think all of us are evangelizing, it's going to need more investment and also more sort of local and state policy infrastructure. I hope that where this is moving in the next couple of years is to a conversation about actual skill acquisition, right? Like I know my third grade daughter's reading level. I don't know if she's on grade level for our CS and digital fluency standards yet, because we have some great assessments of that at the high school level. We have, the AP Computer Science A exam, the CS Principles exam. We have other, dual credit college courses. We have different assessments. There is less of that is broadly available to our schools right now to really look at the skills that our students are developing at the K-8 level, although our team has done some incredible case studies of that with schools that have gone deep into CS. Two, a huge enabling factor is just sustainable funding. Our state has made huge strides with the help of the incredible CS team, as Ron mentioned, in developing state standards, but there isn't funding that accompanies the explicit implementation of these standards. And so there's some reimbursement at the high school level for our students who are enrolled in computer science classes. The state reimburses the public school system, but there is still a real case-making place that I'm in, and that the folks here at on the dais are in year over year to sustain funding, so that this truly is considered its own standalone subject area in the way that all of us understand that it needs to be. When you have that funding in place for at the kind of state and local level, then you can really lean into district leadership. So Eli talked about Brownsville and Brooklyn and seeing this huge growth in computer science. Where you've seen huge gains, there's typically a really incredible superintendent or somebody on a superintendent's team, a couple of school leaders who are real champions and are pushing their colleagues across a district and taking advantage of the resources of the computer science team to help set district goals. So if I'm a superintendent, how am I still holding myself accountable next year to students' access to computer science and having it baked into our superintendent's accountability? And then I think that where we've seen success again in the high school space is as we've launched the Future Ready NYC program in the past 3 years, which is rapidly expanding tech pathways in healthcare, other high growth industries within New York City. We built equity into the expectations. We have overrepresentation in the Bronx, where there was a historical underinvestment in strong college and career preparation programs. We ensured that schools were held accountable for equitable enrollment. And so today, 3 years later, because of some of those local policies we set in place, future-ready tech pathway students who are accessing 4 full years of computer science They're above the citywide poverty rate, so they are more likely to be living in poverty, more likely to be a student in temporary housing. More Black students are represented compared to the citywide average. And so we're really seeing that we're pushing equitable enrollment because we've baked it into the design of these tech pathways. And so, you know, when you think about these, the enabling factors of sustainable funding, district leadership and school leadership having tools and accountability for ongoing access, and then probably get into it later, just the role, could go on about the role of higher ed and our employer partners in having real conversations about what is the innovation year over year so that the curriculum that we're putting in front of our pre-K, 5th grade, 12th grade students is truly relevant and is representing what's changing continuously within tech, within industry.
Yeah. I was gonna say one thing, but I didn't know if Michelle, if you...
Yeah,
Please,
I was gonna agree with Ron when it comes to like the pre-service training. I think that's what motivated me the most. I was introduced to computational thinking and learning by a CUNY professor, Cecilia Espinosa. And she was really the one that opened my eyes to this type of learning because I wasn't raised with computational thinking. I was very much like, this works, this is what you do. So that introduction really helped build my foundation and what I bring as a teacher to New York City public schools. And then that's what helped me introduce computational thinking in my student teaching experience, which is what helped me introduce that to the principal where I was student teaching at, and that's what helped her introduce it school-wide. And we actually got trained by CITE to bring computational thinking across all grade levels, and we have seen some growth within the past couple months after receiving the training as well. So it really stems from pre-service training of teachers.
Yeah, I would love to dig into that deeper too. I mean, it's such an important piece of this conversation today. And Melanie, thank you for your thoughts, because I think you framed out a lot of where we need to continue to go from here. But clearly, there's some real insights on the panel around why training our future teachers is so essential to that. And Ron, just to underscore the data that you were mentioning, you know, reaching about 5,000 teachers, but it did take, 8 years to do it. Over 20% of those teachers have left New York City public schools as well. So there's attrition there, and we see that those investments in training, you mentioned sort of new teachers, but we are talking about in-service teachers, and there's a challenge there, with teachers leaving the system. Some of the data we've looked at suggests or shows that CUNY graduates tend to stay in New York City public schools longer, the longest. That reaching those pre-service teachers means you can actually influence future teachers for many years to come. And just to underscore the data that you mentioned, Ron, 5,000 teachers over 8 or so years, but at scale, CITE has the potential to be training 1,500 new teachers that enter into New York City public schools every year. So we're talking about in 3 years, if at scale, we could be influencing about as many teachers as have been reached through the in-service training in 8. There's like a huge opportunity there. So I want to dig into what that opportunity really looks like. And maybe, I'll come back to you first, Sarah. Helping us understand, what does that training that Michelle's talking about, what does it look like at CUNY today? What do you experience as a future teacher, as a teacher in training, that's different than what your experience might have been like in one of CUNY's 15 colleges of education 5 years ago? And why does that matter?
Great, yeah. So we have, in line with that idea that there are these two levers of in-service and pre-service that are both so important, we have a strategy around both of those areas. So the in-service strategy was that we received this funding from NYCPS to implement a program called CS in 6. And in this innovative program, 600 current teachers got to go back to school to take graduate level courses at CUNY. And they were all in computing and digital literacy's topic areas. They got micro-credentials. Yes. And they got to learn things like how to incorporate AI into a classroom, how to teach digital storytelling to enhance literacy instruction, how to teach problem solving through computational thinking so that students could be better at math and at science, creative coding, right? So CS in 6 has helped our in-service teachers teach their kids what they need for our digital age. And they also got some graduate credit that helps them with their salary step differentials, gets that boost on their resume. And then we have that in-service strategy, which is what Michelle has been describing here. So who teaches the teachers? CUNY faculty, many of whom are here in the room. You can find them after. They all have little CUNY pins. You can ask them about their amazing work. And our faculty are experts in their content areas and in how to teach them to the diverse learners that are at NYCPS. And so what CITE helps CUNY faculty do is develop their knowledge about computing and technology and its connections to what they already do in their content areas and in their disciplines, so that the CUNY faculty can bring the most relevant, cutting-edge research and teaching techniques to their future teachers. So Michelle just mentioned an amazing experience she had with Dr. Espinosa, who is at Lehman College. And just to give you a couple more details, Dr. Espinosa was inspired by the courses, the professional development courses that she took with the CITE initiative, especially around this data analysis tool called Plotting Plots, which can help young readers understand how word frequency varies in a novel. And that's just another entry point for reading and thinking about literature. And so she showed this to Michelle and her classmates. They discussed it. They discussed this bilingual literature that they were using through the lens of that tool. And they also talked about how reading today is not just about words on a physical page. It's about understanding algorithms, all the things that Amber was mentioning, misinformation, disinformation. We have to develop young learners who can read for these kinds of things as well. And so she inspired Michelle and her classmates to create some poetry about the effect of algorithms on their lives. And then Michelle brought this into the classroom where she was teaching at Samara Community School for her student teaching. And I don't know if she wants to say more about what that experience was like. She already shared a little bit about it. But so far, we've had this really exciting impact in the pre-service space. About 330 faculty, about 1/3 of CUNY education faculty across those 15 colleges have taken part in CITE learning opportunities, reaching over 6,500 teacher candidates with those activities that they developed.
That's really awesome, Sarah. And I think, helps us understand a little more clearly what that implementation looks like, that it's really not just more screen time in our classrooms or, teaching every kid to code, but all the different ways in which computational thinking and digital literacies, play out in the classroom. And I wanted to dig into that part of this a little more too. Maybe Ron, I'll bring you in, and Melanie, welcome to jump in, Amber. But, part of, I think, what's so interesting about this moment right now is that we're looking at yet another inflection point in our tech sector and in the broader economy. 2 years ago, we weren't having the same conversation thinking about generative AI, and now we have to. And when New York City Public Schools was first confronted with the advent of Gen AI or the popularization of Gen AI, the response was really a defensive one. We're going to ban AI in schools, and we're going to figure out kind of later, is there a way to integrate this? And Ron, I'm turning to you first, and Melanie, I'd love your thoughts here as well, because part of the other challenge that strikes me from the policy perspective is, well, what are those good jobs that we're going to help prepare our young people for? Those entry-level tech jobs are already jobs that can be done by AI. The engineers that are using AI every day are 10xing their own abilities, but that doesn't mean that we're going to see 10 times more jobs. We'll probably see fewer in some areas and new jobs in other areas. So I'd love, Ron, to start with you here. Help us understand, in an economy where entry-level coding is not the in-demand, occupation that it was even 5 years ago, how does that shift our strategy or our thinking around digital literacies and computational thinking? Where are we now, and how does that fit into preparing our teachers for now and for tomorrow?
I think this is the $1 billion question, right? Because I think many of us that are in this field are grappling with this idea of what are we training / teaching students? Are we actually preparing them for the future when the future is rapidly changing in front of us? And when I think of like some of the data that exists, we know that some of the most in-demand, fastest growing jobs, at least based on the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, are things like AI and machine learning specialists, data analytics, cybersecurity analytics. But what's interesting is that when you talk to employers who have said that they're looking to upskill, they're looking about what it means to upskill their workers versus having the right candidate come in, they're looking at some other skills that aren't necessarily just the hard skills, right? Like they're thinking about agility, adaptability. They want to see that someone has leadership qualities, that they can have a product mindset when they're working with the team. And so I think this question gets to the idea of computational thinking, right? Because it's not just about CS. computational agency, which comes out of Cornell Tech, thinking about the fact that as a creator, I am going to create something that impacts others. What does that mean, right? What is my responsibility around that creation so that I can make sure that I'm creating for the good of society? Of course, you have your CS, which includes artificial intelligence, and you have to think about that combination, that soup of experiences that we're giving young people. So my answer to your question, Eli, when it comes to the future of work is, I think you really have to find a way to blend in everything from your CS, your CT. You have to think about the experiential learning opportunities that are happening. You have to really think about the number of at-bats, and I can't say that enough, right? Like, it's about how many at-bats can we give young people as they're going from K through 12, including the highly focused at-bats that a program like Future Ready gives them to get ready for the workplace. That has to be part of like just the rhythm of the way that we do the work. So it's not a perfect answer, Eli, because I think we're still figuring it out, but I think it's the combination of both the technical skills and the fluency that have to be combined to help young people.
Thanks, Ron. Ellie, I feel you want to jump in, go for it. Thank you.
Ron and I worked together for a long time, so these moments like this where we share a brain. I think that, one of the things I'll share that I don't think that the average person outside of New York City public schools knows is that there's a pretty sophisticated system of industry commissions and councils where one of my number one jobs is convening our employers across the city and state and region to really talk to us about what they need from their workforce, what are the gaps they see, what are the gaps in our curriculum, being really honest and forthright about places where our curriculum and our preparation needs to look different. So these are conversations that were happening last week, next week. Like this is a real system that is in place that New York City Public Schools is responsibly rolling out curriculum and experiences. I think Ron's point about like the number of at-bats that a student has is really important. I talked a little bit about Future Ready. We've grown our career-connected learning programs like Future Ready by 40% in just 3 years across the city. So massive expansion. The largest growing pathways are those in tech. We have not launched a pathway without doing really deep labor market analysis and understanding what are the trends, what are employers saying, informing the curriculum, working with our CUNY partners so that a student in a Future Ready pathway is taking an early college course that really aligns to that pathway and to a degree of value within that pathway. Every Future Ready student is getting a couple important things as part of the package. They're getting college and career advising starting in 9th grade. They're getting access to career-connected instruction, so that's the 3 to 4 years of computer science education. They're getting work-based learning experience, so that can look like career panels when you're a 9th grader, when you're 14 and just getting started in high school. That is going to progress to a workplace challenge where when you're in 10th or 11th grade, you actually, in the safety of your school and your peers and your teachers, you're doing a work experience, you're getting paid for it. There's a real employer task, but you're still doing it in your classroom and starting to build those collaboration skills, starting to understand deadlines, starting to understand that you're working with employer feedback cycles. And then by an 11th and 12th grade, our students are entering paid internships, apprenticeships. This means that when a student is graduating from a Future Ready New York City Public School program, they've had a head start with early college credits and credentials in some case. They've had really high dosage advising. They've had significant CS instruction, and then they've had a lot of those like real at-bats in the world of work too, to start to try on, how do I present myself in the world of work? How do I build those kind of skills in communication and collaboration and also contextualize it within some of the needs of various kind of tech employers? So this is real work that's happening right now that we're going to continue to iterate on. I met with Addison last week at Chelsea Tech High School, which is one of our oldest high schools in the city that has launched a Future Ready program. And, Addison is an apprentice in our IT division in New York City Public Schools. He's helping us solve data infrastructure and privacy, solutions for the school system he's a part of. And he's getting paid for that and spending part of his time in our IT offices and part of the time finishing his high school diploma. So these kind of opportunities where the school experience is so much more relevant and authentic, and students are really walking away with a level of exposure and credentials, above and beyond graduation requirements.
Can I
Go ahead,
just
Amber.
add
Yeah.
one thing? Just that I think we all want a sense of what the actual jobs are going to be and the skills are, and the only constant right now is change. And so we really need to be, we kind of need to shift the way we're thinking about this. We used to have, like, think about when the internet came out, we had like 5-10 years to get used to it, and it stayed pretty much the same. But now we're talking about generative AI or AI now. That was, the way we would define that was different certainly 2 years ago and even 2 weeks ago, right? Like last night I was talking to, has anyone talked to the new Sesame name, Maya? Oh my God, it was crazy. She breathes. I asked her why she liked the things she did, and she was like, well, of course I like these things, don't you? And I was like, but you're not a person. She was like, well, neither are you. No, she wasn't. Anyway, but I just think that the reason why we're so focused on computational thinking is because it's a really broad bucket underneath in how you think about technology. Like, AI is a misnomer. We're really talking about emergent tech. The minute we get our arms around generative AI, we're going to be in quantum. We're going to be in the next thing that we can't even imagine. So we need to, I think we really need to be careful about not doing what we've done in the past when we were like, okay, everyone just needs to learn Java. I used to run an organization where we were just teaching everyone to use Adobe Flash. Does anyone remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that was going to be the ticket to the world. Well, Adobe killed Flash, and we were like, well, what do we do now? So I think this idea that we can have a specific skill, and if we can just do that, it'll be okay, is going to get us into trouble. And then CS for All is amazing. But it took us 9 years. Can you imagine if we were like, well, we're going to figure it out for AI, and in 9 years we were sitting here doing it again? We need to be thinking more expansively and more flexibly, and that is part of why it's so important that we can train our teachers to do that, because they need to be able to sit in the classroom, recognize what's going on in the world, and shift their students' thinking patterns so that they can be the ones who are using technology to question. Yeah.
I really appreciate that, Amber. I think with that,
can I
that
jump in?
segue, yeah, Ron, I know it's going to come on in, and
Just-
I'd love to move the conversation toward how we do fulfill that mission. And by all means, jump in.
So sorry. I just want to piggyback off of what Amber said. Once upon a time, I was a developer at IBM, and we did use Macromedia products, right? I remember being trained in Cold Fusion, right? Which you probably don't even know what the heck it is, but it doesn't exist anymore. And I think this gets to the point of what you both are saying, right? I think like a future ready is perfect when we're thinking about a highly specific skill, right? Or job or career. But that's like the end of the funnel, right? The funnel is widest when we think about those early interventions that are happening from K through 8. And I think we are training kids the same way that we think about math, science, social studies, right? Those subject areas, computational thinking or computing education is part of that overall fluency that positions them for opportunities, positions them to be agile enough to understand how to leverage different tech. I am not successful because I learned how to code in 1999. I am successful because of all of those other skills that employers are looking for. And so we have to find that right dosage of skills, right? But also the breadth of learning, because that's what affluent communities have, right? Going for them, they have the time to experiment. They have the time to break it and fix it. They have the time to go through a thought process versus our schools, and it's not to their fault. Things are moving so fast with so many competing priorities that if I am in the Bronx, how do I have time to think about providing a computational thinking experience when I'm just trying to make sure my kids can get through the day? So just want to say thank you for that comment, Amber.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I mean, and Amber, totally agree. I think where I'd love to hear your thoughts going forward is how we help the city move this work forward. And it strikes me that a couple things have already been put on the table. One is certainly the case for K through 8, which multiple folks have mentioned. But you help us tease that out a little bit further. If we want to make this progress, why is it so important that we focus earlier, and how do we do it? The second part that I'd love to ask all of you about is, if you've got policymakers out there, some of whom are tuned into this conversation, some are even in the room today, who I think are compelled by this vision of building a more equitable tech sector in general, because they know that, hey, we've got constituents, the families I serve, they want good jobs for their kids, and we see that that's where New Yorkers are getting good jobs, and how do we close that gap? But also to have some clarity about, what do you want us to do, elected officials of New York City, policymakers who are compelled by that vision? It's maybe hard to understand, I can, somebody could tell me, pour more money into this very specific adult track training program, and I can get 300 more folks with good jobs, you know? But it's harder, I think, for them to understand, well, we do fund our public schools. You're trying to kind of connect the dots and show, but we need to do more to help make sure that there's equitable access in the earliest grades, and that the strategy to do that is to reach our teachers, and we have to reach our teachers before they get into the classroom. And I think it's frankly a little difficult for policymakers to follow the thread. So I'd love to ask you to help us help them understand where to invest, what to do. What are those next steps? And maybe I'll start with you, Sarah, but love to hear everybody's thoughts, how to move this work forward, and what is it that policymakers can do, you know, outside of the Department of Education alone to accelerate that work?
Thank you. So CUNY CITE is offering a sustainable solution that goes beyond we're going to reach these, 300 people in this kind of workforce training program right now. It offers a sustainable solution because we can reach adult learners year after year after year after year once we set up the infrastructure to be able to do so. That's what CUNY does. We're in the business of adult learning, of teacher learning, and so we can support sort of on both of those ends. The in-service strategy, continuing to offer courses in an ongoing way to our in-service teachers in these areas through a sort of micro-credential, through those kinds of tuition-free opportunities for teachers, because we know teachers can't be spending all of their hard-earned money on taking more and more and more courses. We want these to be accessible to them. We want them to be exciting and cutting edge. And then the pre-service strategy is really institutionalizing computing as a priority for teacher preparation. So this isn't, like you said, just a one-off program. This means that we want to support our make sure that all teacher candidates that attend CUNY from here on out, no matter what professor they have, no matter what program they're in, have the opportunity to learn about computing and digital literacy. So that means we need to make it part of the fabric of teacher education. It takes time and funding for faculty to learn about these areas, to do research in these areas, develop expertise. And we've been doing it so far. We have 68 CUNY programs at 13 colleges that are committed to this work, that have already started changing their fundamental learning goals for teachers to include important critical computational and digital literacy skills. And so making it, institutionalizing it in this way is, I think, something that can be a real boon for the city.
Go ahead, Melody, yeah.
I'll jump on. So first thing I'd say is, like, you don't need to be an expert to be a champion for this work. I do not have a computer science background. I helped found the Academy for Software Engineering. I worked with really smart folks here and in our team and at the school level who we were able to collaborate and understand, like, how we increased access. So if you find yourself in that kind of space of, like, influence, but not fundamentally understanding some of this work and the nuances of it, I think if you understand the high-level value proposition of the economic benefits, the societal benefits, more diverse set of New Yorkers in these jobs that are growing, if all of those things appeal to you, then come and visit a classroom. Come and visit the classroom that I visited in Jamaica, Queens with Tunisia a couple of months ago, and see young people practicing computational thinking with amazing teachers like Michelle. I think when you see it and you understand this value proposition, then it's easier to dig into, well, what are the sustainable funding, and policies that are going to really make sure that this isn't a nice to have, but this is like a fundamental, literacy and offering of New York City public schools. I think sustained investment in public systems, like the partnership between New York City Public Schools and CUNY, is really important. None of that happens, magically. It happens because, people appear and in this audience work incredibly hard at that partnership and making sense across very different systems, right? What governs a K-12 system is very different from what governs a higher ed system. And so that sort of sustained partnership, because when we have a teacher like Michelle who's gone through pre-service, we want her to have a warm handoff into our system where the school supports, the coaching supports, the ongoing professional learning that she gets from our team and from our districts really matches and picks up where CUNY and where Lehman College leaves off. And so that just means our teams have to work so closely so that we make things make sense across our higher ed and K-12 systems. So, but really easy step one is, I think, ask any of us to come visit a classroom, and it's a great place to start to get the wheels turning about, well, how did we get to this particular opportunity and this teacher and this school leader being able to offer students these experiences, particularly in the K-8 space.
Amber, I'd like to bring you back in on this, in part because, through the Robin Hood Learning and Technology Fund, Gotham Gives, Google, in addition to that initial seed funding from New York City Public Schools, you all were instrumental in getting CITE off the ground in the first place. But as we've explored the program more recently, we've seen that, it's those philanthropic partners that have committed to continuing this work right now. I'd love to get your thoughts, Amber, on what is the role of the City of New York in keeping this going? We've been really fortunate to benefit from philanthropic partners that are willing to spark this work, to help invest in it, to help continue it, but ultimately to reach the scale that we're talking about to build this infrastructure. It seems like we can't do that relying on the continued support of philanthropy. So help us understand, what would you like to see the city do, the mayor or folks in government do to keep this going?
Yeah, well, I think thanks for that. Yes, and as I think some people know, I came to Robin Hood in the hopes of doing this work. So I feel great pride and appreciation. Ultimately, it's about ensuring that this remains a priority, right? I mean, I think our city leaders can say that if we want New York City to remain a cutting-edge, innovative leader for all the people in New York City and for the country, frankly, the world, we need to invest in this kind of education. And that's how we got to, 5 chancellors over the past 9 years, and computer science for all persisted. That was because people said it was a priority, people at all levels of leadership. And we need to hear that again. So that's number one. And words only go so far, so we need to put some dollars behind it. Last year, through Center for an Urban Future, we made a bid for baseline funding for CUNY CITE. We got really close. We didn't get there. None of this happens magically. I think the thing that I'm taking away from today's panel is that we have the people and the knowledge in place to do this, right? I mean, you're hearing from everyone. You're hearing, we have the teachers, we have the leaders. So, but it's not going to happen if there isn't some dollars in place. And actually, it's not that expensive to do it, and it really is sustainable. Our systems have become very curative. We produce teachers who aren't ready for the classroom that is of today, and then we offer them 100 hours of training, and every Saturday, can you imagine starting a job where they were like, welcome, you're never going to go home because we're going to train you for all the things you don't think you know how to do. But we can turn that around, right? So that really, it would be prioritization and investment.
And just to underscore kind of when you say, that it's not so much money, I mean, we were looking into this in the research that we've been doing. It really strikes me that it's such a modest investment that we're talking about, looking at the gap between the funding that exists for CITE and the opportunity to help CITE reach scale. We've calculated we're looking at something like $2 million over 3 years. It's a modest ask to be able to keep this going. The micro-credential idea, and we should talk more about that for a second, we're looking at a budget of under $1 million to really get that going.
Million?
With the opportunity, sorry, go ahead. Sarah, go ahead.
Say
Jump
that
in.
again? Sorry.
Oh, it said under $1 million
Under
potentially
$1 million.
to keep it
I
going?
heard 100 million and that's it.
There'll be a big gap between keeping CITE going and a micro-credential under $1 million.
Under $1 million, yes.
So these are modest amounts for a city with a nearly $120 billion budget, but also to understand the potential impact as this helps to institutionalize these resources and make them and reach the scale of CUNY. So yeah,
Can I add another number? So we were looking at the cost savings for New York City public schools at really back of the envelope. Please, nobody actually check my numbers on this because it's pretty broad brushstrokes. But if we can make sure that teachers enter the system already trained, we can potentially save New York City public schools somewhere around $3 million a year if they're trying to train all 5,000 new teachers that come in. And that's in any discipline. That's computing. We're also looking at this in science of reading. So you just imagine if we can put $2 million over 3 years, we could potentially save $6 million over 3 years for New York City public schools, not to mention that students would get that instruction on day one, right? I mean, you heard Michelle talk about how she needed to have that instruction, that support over a couple of years. That means that your first year of fifth grade students probably weren't able to get that special experience you talked about. So I just wanted to add that number to the mix.
Yeah, really helpful, Amber. I'd like to ask one last question about policy recommendations, then we'll turn it over to our audience. Maybe, Ron, I'll start with you. We were in an election year, and it's heating up right now. We've got candidates for mayor that are frankly out there talking about, but also clamoring for insight and ideas around how do we help address some of the city's biggest challenges, whether that's how do we prepare our future New Yorkers, for a future that's going to be shaped immeasurably by innovations in technology, how do we help more young people get ahead, get on the path to good jobs and careers. I'm curious, starting with you, Ron, what's your advice to those folks, those candidates, our current mayor and all the folks that want that job right now when it comes to computing education? What would you recommend that the mayor of New York City do to move this work forward?
I think I will extend the conversation that happened a moment ago. I think we have to think of this as an economic mobility priority, right? It's an imperative in many ways. And if you zoom out and you think about the connection between a K-12 education, a CUNY education, right, and access to that economic wealth that is flowing through certain parts of this city, any future mayor has to get back down to basics and think about if there are 100,000 tech jobs that were created in the last 10 years, right? And those tech jobs on average have a $130,000 salary on average. How am I going to make sure at the fundamental level that as many young people as possible have access to that pipeline? So my recommendation number one would be go back to the drawing board, think about the work that has been done, and think about the overall pipeline that has to be put in place. And my colleagues on this stage have already said the serious work of K-12, computer science, or computational thinking being part of the fabric of the work that we do. And I would recommend that you start with treating it like a subject area, treating it like an actual part of the system that has a strategy for teacher recruitment, that has a strategy for learning standards, that has a strategy for the way that we're thinking about the in-service pipeline versus the pre-service pipeline. This has to get the serious attention that's required for us to make sure that the young people that are in classrooms right now have access to opportunity. And number two is, I would say, show how serious you are about this work. Make sure there's an executive director of CS or computational thinking. Make sure there's a department for CS education. Make sure the state and the city are working together to think about what that means. No more talk, no more doing it to say we have it. Put the work in so that we can, once again, as Amber said, be proud of the leadership that we are providing to the entire country around CS and computational thinking. That once happened, it can happen again.
Ron for mayor.
No.
Ron's a tough act to follow, but I think what I would just build on is our public systems in New York City Public Schools and CUNY, have really done the work over the past couple of years to more meaningfully anchor ourselves in what's the long-term return on investment for a student and a family investing their time in education in New York City Public Schools and going into CUNY. And we're setting up the long-term data systems and infrastructure and work so that we really are holding ourselves accountable to students' economic success and career success. And so both public systems are really poised to take that to the next level. We've made some good strides. This is the first year that our high schools actually have computer science as part of how students' college and career readiness is measured on a 100-point scale. And there's huge opportunity to think about college and career readiness at the K-8 level, and how we're holding ourselves accountable as a system, how we're also making the appropriate investments. So many of our teachers that are the real practitioners and evangelists, including Michelle here on the stage, have a lot of the answers to the how and the innovation in the classroom and the curriculum. We're working with a group of teachers right now who are looking at some of the centralized curriculum that is being implemented across the city and looking at how do you develop lesson extensions that really weave in computational thinking and CS concepts in ways that are going to allow us to blow access up in a much stronger way and think about both the pre-service strategy but also the in-service strategy of really incredible teachers who are in our system right now who need a curriculum and a training model that walks them through how they can, particularly in the K-8 space, bring computational thinking concepts into some of the curriculum that they're being asked to offer by their district and by central leadership.
Michelle, can I bring you in on this one more time and ask you, when you think about what it would take to see a lot more of your fellow K-8 teachers doing what you've done, integrating computing concepts into your classrooms, what's your advice there?
My advice would be exactly what we tell our students: never stop being a learner. Once we stop being a learner, we hinder ourselves and our students from having all these learning experiences in our classroom and entering our classroom. This is what has helped me implement new things and computational thinking, even though, as Melanie said, I'm definitely not an expert. But I admit that I, and my students know this as well, I learn from them just as much as they learn from me. So as long as we're learning together and going through the process together, I welcome that environment to my classroom. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Well, on that note, I'd love to turn it over to our audience, and we can maybe learn from them too, and they can learn from you. So for folks who have questions, throw your hands up. I'll go to folks. My colleagues have microphones. They'll bring them to you, so just hang on for a second. Please say your name. If you're here with an organization, please try to keep your questions brief, so we'll get to as many as possible. And for folks that are tuned in online, throw your questions in the chat. My colleagues will text me. If you have questions online, we'll get to those as well. So we'll see the hands up for now. I'm just going to take stock of the room. We'll start right here. Microphone's coming over, and then we'll continue from there. And John, you want to go? There's a question right behind you, and we can get those first two.
Shay Guholder, dad of fourth grader, PTA board vice president, and a tech entrepreneur. I don't really have a question. I just have 3 quick bullets, random. I guess New York City is always boasted of being the greatest city at many things: police, sports, etc. We don't boast of having the best education system. I think we need to believe in a vision where we can create the best education system. Even if it's not true, it can be true in the future. The vision we have of enabling K through 8, I agree with, but even for parents who are in tech, they want their children to experience great computational education. I think it helps us to feel good about working in the city as parents today, rather than taking them out to the city. So it's both the children accelerating into the jobs, but the current job force benefiting from knowing their kids are benefiting from a free, high quality education. I think that needs to be my second bullet. There are a lot of companies that have technology. I used to work at JP Morgan. After 4 years, we turn that technology in and get new computers. If that can be sent to kids so they can have computers at school and at home, it allows personalized learning, it allows greater access, it allows teachers to be much more creative, and it accelerates all the programs we're talking about. And I think that is something we can consider. A lot of great employers benefit from those employees. Employees today would love to know that we're helping the next generation with technology that's 4 years old and that can be highly used. The third one is, to stay number one, you have to create a system whereby you can have innovation and experimentation from the ground up. So schools can try programs that start from the ground up, and those experiments could lead to best practices that could infuse and create standards going forward. We talked about the state's education policy. That should include the ability to create and experiment, because that is a product mindset. And as the world changes, products and needs become still relevant.
That's great. Thank you. I'll turn it into a quick question for anybody. One thing you'd like to see the state do to support the computing education work happening in New York City?
I'll throw one in there.
Yeah.
And this is with love to my state family. The same way that I've been tough on the city, right? Because I believe so wholeheartedly that we have so much work to do for the kids, right? I think the same has to be done from the state level, right? The city can't do it alone, right? And we know that there are the old tension between the state and the city. I think this is an opportunity for the state to really think about that CS supervisor position. Think about, and I'm going to say a statement here, CS is not CTE, right? We're talking about K-12 CS education, right? CS can be a pathway within a CTE program, but it's not CTE. So with that, I would say make sure that we have a state supervisor and an executive director of CS in the city that are working hand in hand to really think about how this work can be done.
That's great, Ron. Thank you. So I saw there's a question on this side of the room. Did you have your hand up still? Yeah, go for it. And then we'll head to the back next. Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Hello. Oh, sorry. I'm Jessie Roeder. I teach robotics, VR, other computer science at John Adams High School out in Ozone Park. This is my 10th year doing that. And my question is, so we talked about reaching teachers who are already in service. We talked about reaching people in the traditional education pathway pre-service. But I got into teaching actually as a teaching fellow because my undergrad was engineering physics with a CS engineering specialization. They took me under physics, but there's nothing like that as far as I'm aware. They are trying to pull career changers and people who have a background specifically in CS in the same way that they're doing that with with physics, with biology, with history. What's the place for bringing people into the classroom with industry experience, with an actual background?
Thank you so much. Thanks for representing John Adams. I think that this builds on some of what Ron shared in terms of when you have folks at the state level and the city level and our union partners not doing magical thinking and saying, next year we're going to have 10,000 computer science teachers, but really practically thinking about what are the strategies for teacher recruitment. There are some pathways for folks who have, prior career experience. That's how we hired the amazing CS teacher once upon a time at my school. But we do need to continue to work with the state and really roll up our sleeves on where do we make it, where do we create some flexibilities that really value experience that somebody may be coming in with is not the same as going through. I was also a teaching fellow, going through the grad program. And so I think that that's a place where the role of kind of a dedicated state staff working with New York City Public Schools, working with the UFT and the CSA on what are practical ways where we can attract talent. We talk to a lot of principals across the city who find really innovative ways to hire talent. And I talked to a principal out in Queens at Hart High School who during the pandemic recruited somebody who'd been laid off from JFK and was able to work through some alternative certification pathway. But that takes really somebody who can navigate the system and navigate those sort of city and state loopholes. We need to make it much easier. And so I think that part of the proposal here on the table is now that we have standards in place, now that we have an expectation of K-12 computer science education, have we done the due diligence across sort of state and city level to look at the adaptive strategies for our current workforce, our incoming workforce, and other talent recruitment strategies that are going to allow us to have really qualified folks in the classroom.
I'll also add we now have CS teacher certification, which is actually something that is, I think, a hallmark of the last 10 years that's come in and supported. And there are many pathways that those teachers can use, including, of course, getting their degrees. We have 2 programs at CUNY now that are going to be, or that are licensing computer science teachers or can lead to licensure in computer science ed. And so bringing in folks into programs like that so they can transform the skills they already have from industry into those that will work in the classroom.
That's really helpful. And thank you for the question. So I saw a hand up at the back of the room. You've got the microphone. Great.
Hi. I'm Birkin Gong. I'm the digital director at Bronx Children's Museum. And my question, well, first of all, this was a really great panel. Appreciate everything that you guys shared with us. Very informative. My question was really around that the discussion has highlighted CS for all from pre-K to high school. And so I was wondering how can informal learning spaces like BXCM, Bronx Children's Museum, which serve children and families, starting at pre-K, contribute to improving access to computational learning, agency, and computer science? Like how can we be a resource for improving these systems in the Bronx?
Well, first, our CS team who's here in the audience, can you raise your hand for a second? So please talk to one of these fine people or me after the panel up here in the front and to the side. The only way we've gotten as far as we have in 9 years, knowing that there's still a long way to go, is because this was an ecosystem effort, right? The school system, 9 years ago did not have a computer science team until Debbie Marcus, wherever she is, and other, Ron Summers and other giants in this work, right, helped create the sort of central hub within our school system. Ankit, Sarah, and others building that kind of central hub within the CUNY system. So we'd love to have conversations with Bronx Children's Museum, other community organizations, educational organizations, because so much of what we've been able to do in terms of family empowerment, student empowerment, helping a school build a culture of computer science and computational thinking has stemmed from partnerships like sort of the potential that you're speaking.
And I would want to do the same with our CUNY faculty. Can you all raise your hands? Because we're always looking for innovative placements for future teachers to learn great practices. And we know these come from out of school just in the way that they come from our awesome CS for All classrooms in New York City system. I myself came out of the out of school time world and know how rich those practices are, especially around digital media learning. And so I would hope we can continue to make connections both to the school spaces, K-12, and then also to our CUNY faculty.
I'm going to put in one more plug. Hire our students as interns and apprentices. We are always looking for. We have students who are really ready with some of what we've described up here today, and ready to facilitate younger student learning, and kind of equipped to bring an educational experience to life that might complement what you all offer. So talk to us about the educational opportunities, but also the internship opportunities, so our young people can apply some of that CS into the museum experience.
And one thing I'll throw in is I'd love to talk to you too, because I work for Mouse, and that is a community-based after-school organization in quotation marks. We have to think about these pipelines that exist, right? So the DOE at center, right, is the leader, but there are a ton of us on the outside, the not-for-profits, that are trying to serve the city also. So I think there are connections that we should try to make, because we serve the city, but we also serve you as a pathway for your kids to come to us and for them to go to another program. So let's think about that also.
Thanks, Ron. I think we have time for just one more question. I saw, your hand up there in the second row. So microphone's coming to the side. Great.
Hi, folks. My name is Joshua Brella. I'm the head of access and partnerships for Levana Labs. And my question is, we've seen here amazing educators are the driving force. And so my question is, what are we doing to drive more BIPOC educators into the workforce, keep them in the workforce, and cultivate locally? And I ask this because Massachusetts, I was a co-captain for the Educator Diversity Act, which is passed, and the state is putting money where their mouth is, and there are going to be funding initiatives to cultivate talent and keep talent there and build those pathways from the high school through college, and then bring those same people back into the building. So I wonder what, in New York, which is diverse educators can move a mountain, so what are we doing to keep those folks into these fields and also give them awareness simultaneously into the world of STEAM and CS?
I would say that just in terms of connecting this ecosystem that's here today, Shamir Stevens, Amy Way, and New York City Public Schools are doing incredible work with Black Men Teach. The CS team has worked with our teacher recruitment arm of New York City Public Schools for many years, and there's been tons of lessons learned and lots of bright spots in terms of intentional recruitment for BIPOC teachers. And so I think from just our local level, we're happy to bring some of those experts, connect some of those experts and what we've done. And then I think something that I hear our chancellor's voice, we have to think about educator supports and the retention that you named, in a different way. And so, thinking really creatively about the incentives and the ongoing training that makes one want to continue to meaningfully build their career in New York City Public Schools is really important. And that goes from, we talked about coaching earlier today and what it means to have a coach in your class that's helping you course correct and learn in real time. What it means to have, we have educator industry insight visits that we're hosting all through this summer, all through this spring, where hundreds of our educators are going to Accenture and Google and a variety of our New York employers, and really getting to understand and ask questions and see the career connections that, I'm a teacher by training, and so I don't have the industry background. I'm not going to know how to bring some of those connections to life if I don't have that sort of relevant understanding. And so I think that when a teacher is able to feel supported in the right way, when we have intentional recruitment strategies, when we're able to have strategies that help a teacher really authentically and meaningfully connect with students in ways that connect to their, career connect opportunities. You heard from Michelle; she's learning as much from her students as they're learning from her. Those are some of the I think those are some of the real bright spots in that work.
Awesome. Well, folks, I think that is all the time we have for our amazing panel. So if you join me, yes, in a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you, and stay tuned. Right now, we'll move directly into the second panel of our conversation this morning. Thank you so much. With Councilmember Joseph, and come and join me.
In here. This is not a panel anymore. This is a one-on-one.
That's right. A fireside chat. So we'll warm up the fire. The WNYC studios team could crank up the fire for us. That would be great.
And some marshmallows, maybe.
Absolutely.
Some s'mores.
Let's get cozy. I hope everybody brought their blankets. So, Councilmember, thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled in a room where I think you maybe need no introduction, but let me just say we're so thrilled to be joined today by Councilmember Rita Joseph, represents the great District 40 in Brooklyn in the New York City Council, and is the chair of the Committee on Education. Councilmember, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This is my second panel here. Last time we talked about higher education when I was here with Chancellor CUNY Chancellor, along with Bishop Bury from Robin Hood.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you back.
Thank you.
Just to warm up the room, a round of applause for Councilmember Joseph. We're just really thrilled to have you again and take time out of a very busy time of year.
First day of the preliminary
absolutely.
budget hearings. So I ran away a little bit, and then to run back.
Thank you for doing that. We could dig all the way into the school's budget this year, but actually we want to start in a little bit of a different place today.
Yes.
To give you a change of pace.
All right.
We've heard already so much this conversation about the importance of computing education in our schools as key to ensuring that we are building a meaningful pathway pipeline into our increasingly tech-powered economy, but also as even on a more fundamental level as the building blocks of ensuring that every young person is able to participate fully in not just our economy, but our society that is increasingly shaped by and powered by technology. And we talked very specifically in that first panel about how do we get there? What are the steps that we need to be taking to get there? You've championed technology education throughout your career as a teacher, as an educator, long before your time in the council. Issues around digital inclusion, around computing education, around teacher preparation. I'm curious, where do you think we are seeing the most progress in our schools when it comes to technology and computing education? And what's working right now?
One of the things I saw is teachers are engaged, they're excited to it. And one of the things I've always said is teachers have to be like students, right? When we introduce a concept, we have to allow them the space to play with it as well. When I was teaching math, I used to use manipulatives, but I didn't just go straight to the lesson. I allowed people to make mistakes, enjoy it first, and then go to the lesson. We're making a lot of progress in CS for All. We saw more teachers are getting trained. Is it perfect? No. Is there room for improvement? Yes, because I've always said that the city needs a digital literacy plan, which the city doesn't have yet. It was in progress under Mayor Bloomberg, and then the previous administration came in. I don't think much of it was moved, but I think now we're at a stage where everything is moving so fast, and students are leaving their educators behind in terms of technology. I think there should be a digital plan for New York City, and how we move New York City students, educators, and most importantly, families should be part of that conversation as well.
No, that's really helpful. Well, let's talk about a little bit of what you see as maybe some of the key components of a plan like that. When we look at the data, we see that right now only about 1 in 5 schools is actually meeting CS for All's equity goals, meaning in general that girls and in particular Black and Latino students are still underrepresented across the system. We see that the disparities exist at the borough level too. In Queens and on Staten Island, about a quarter of all students were taking computing classes last year. And in the Bronx, it was just 1 in 9. So we see the gaps that still persist. I'm curious what you see as the keys to closing those gaps. What are those investments? I know you're talking about creating a plan that doesn't fully exist today, but what do you see as the key components if we want to make progress on closing those remaining gaps? What should some of those components be?
Invest in schools. I visit the Bronx a lot, and what I'm seeing in the computer rooms are Apple computers that are at least 12 years old, and that's what students are using. So maybe we need to do an assessment and what digital devices we have available in schools for teachers and students to use, and then invest in them, making sure they're up to date, they're not behind. That's one of the first things I said. Why aren't students using these devices? Because they're old, right? And no one knows how to use them because they're outdated, and I get that a lot. And it's phone calls and it's advocacy and making sure they're in partnerships with their electeds, New York City Public Schools, and strategic partnerships in using that. For example, we did a program over the summer with partnership with Girls Who Code. It was to teach high school students AI through financial literacy. But guess what we did? We removed all the barriers that would have been there for a student. If you lacked a device, we provided one. If you lacked broadband, one was provided. And as an incentive, there was a stipend for young people to do this. So first we have to assess what we have. So New York City Public Schools know that I'll be calling them for the assessment on technology. What do we have and where do we have to invest? In order for us to move the system forward, we also have to invest in it and train teachers. Teachers are way behind. Students are still running circles. The students who have access. For example, the students who AI is not allowed to be used on a device, if that's the only device they have, when they get home, if they can't use it, the student who, for example, my son would go home and have access to AI or other platforms because he does not need a New York City Public School device that usually has firewalls on them.
No, that's helpful. So, I mean, let me ask a little bit about that latter piece that you just mentioned around teachers. Because, you know, when I look at the data, it certainly seems that in general, compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, New York City Public Schools have much better access, for instance, to broadband. You know, not every school equally, and there's classrooms, and there's technology goes down, there's issues, but compared to where we were a decade ago, you know, for instance, right? When it comes to devices, obviously a lot of students still struggle to have access to those devices at home.
Correct.
There are programs in place. They're not everywhere, and there's issues with where the devices even end up, right?
Correct.
But I would think in many classrooms today, again, I'm just saying compared to a decade ago, there are now devices that didn't exist 10 years ago. I don't discount that there's still gaps or areas where, you know, they're out of date. But compared to where we were, I think one thing that kind of strikes me is that even with access to the technology, the hardware, the physical, you know, tools, it doesn't mean that every classroom by any means is actually using those tools and even close to their full potential. And when we kind of dig down to understand why, I would say the key issue that comes up in our research over and over again is teacher preparation.
Correct.
You know, even if you have the technology in the classroom. So knowing that you had that in-person teaching experience, I'd love to get your thoughts on why is the teacher preparation piece of this so important? What's the difference in a school where, or in a classroom where a teacher doesn't just have access to the technology, but is actually prepared to use it and integrate it into their learning, and not just physical technology, but computing concepts? What's the difference there? What does that look like? Why is the teacher preparation piece, as you mentioned, is sort of one of your, you know, top kind of couple items? Why is it so important?
I think maybe we need to start talking to the universities that do the teacher preparation. That should be part of the curriculum. Because I remember when I was in school getting prepared to become a teacher, it was only one required computer class. And it was the basic. And I'm sure all the other teachers who were trained know there was one class. And that was it. And then you'll figure it out on your own. So now I think a deeper conversation should be happening with the state as well. This is where I think one of my colleagues, Ron, said that the state needs to come in and take more of an ownership in this as well. In putting out a curriculum to train teachers to use technology, it should not be one class, it should be ongoing. As technology is evolving, teachers also have to stay prepared and ahead of technology development. When I took that one class, I was the one who was always curious. I've been using technology since I was 8 years old because I went to an affluent school district, right? What you would call. But those who go and teach into other schools, you find that most of them are also under-resourced. So this is where we also have to scale up and then make sure we're scaling up teacher training, and it has to be ongoing. It can't be a drive-through training. I remember the days where you go take a PD, here's the material, one PD, and then you go home and you figure it out. You're on your own. Normally, teachers who know what to do, they create cohorts, and they support each other in learning the material. But if that doesn't exist in your school community, you're left on your own to figure it out, and we're always going to be behind. I visited schools. I went to visit a school on Friday. They had 3D printers. They were doing all kinds of stuff. But the teacher was trained, and I asked her, she said, I did this on my own. I train myself, attend summer classes, teachers that are motivated who have the time to, who may not have a family, have the time to go train, find a new technology, go and find out whatever's out there, free classes for them. In order for them to bring that. And then some of the other teachers will turn key for teachers who don't know. So they have to build community in order to support that work. So that should not be the case. It should start from the time they're preparing to become an educator, to have those tools already in their toolbox before they even stand before students.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think Ron also in the previous panel mentioned, look, when you start with professional development for in-service teachers, it really begins with who already raises their hands.
Correct.
You know? But when you start with everybody that's in training, you're able to reach folks before they decide how they want to specialize, what they want to do. And you mentioned higher education. Obviously, CUNY is what we have right now in New York City that's really doing this work in a powerful way. We talked in this first panel extensively about the CUNY CITE program, you know, Computing Integrated Teacher Education. We know that in the City Council's response budget last year, there was a line in there about supporting the CITE program. It ultimately didn't make it all the way to the finish line into the final budget. I wanted to ask you, given your advocacy, your support for the strategy of reaching teachers while they're still learning at CUNY, do you see your colleagues at the council getting behind a relatively modest investment to expand the work of CITE? Is that something you can see the city getting behind this year? You know, what might it take to get there?
Well, as someone who sit on the budget negotiation team, this will be something that will be at the center of our conversation this year. And gather my colleagues, right? I shouldn't be the only voice yelling for let's get this done, because it impacts each and every one and impacts the whole city if we have teachers that are trained in this technology. So I'm going to gather my committee, one, and then gather other council members who are on the B&T, and then gather my colleagues to make sure that they're standing behind me and as I advocate for this kind of funding. We're hoping to push it this year to the finish line because we know the need is there, and I talk so much about it.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, that's really exciting to hear. I think, you know, we're really impressed with the progress that the program has made, but also we're able to show we're still only now able to reach with existing funding over the first 4 years about a half of the students that are enrolled in CUNY's 15 colleges of education. So if the funding were there to bring that program to scale, the potential impact, as we heard in the first panel, is 1,500 or so new teachers entering into New York City public schools every single year. You know,
so that's a game changer. They're coming prepared, and the students are not running circles around them with technology. Because I get teachers, I have students, interns that do go in, and they're like, well, they're younger from CUNY, and they're like, the teachers have no idea this came from one of the AI platforms because they're not trained to pick up on it. So it would be a game changer. Every year, 1,500, the long-term investors. So this is a long-term investment into schools. And as you know, education has always been a top priority for this council. The speaker, myself, especially yelling everything across education, investments. No,
it's really exciting to hear. Let me ask you one other question about the CITE program or what it might take to kind of get there. As a teacher, former teacher, could you see the UFT getting behind this? Is there a way to imagine that, you know, the teachers that are in service right now could actually kind of come out in support of this program? Obviously, the strategy is all about investing in teachers.
Correct.
But I'm curious, do you see a path to support for this kind of an initiative from the teachers or from their representatives?
Absolutely. It should be an all-hands-on-deck kind of effort. It shouldn't only be the legislators or policymakers who's making this decision. UFT represent the largest group of teachers in New York City, so I think this would be an investment for them long term, and this will also create teacher retention, right? That's something we talk about, shortage areas and shortage of teachers. So this would also create retention for educators to want to stay because you're investing in me, and I said that in shortage areas there should be incentives for folks to want to do this, invest, whether it's subsidized tuition, whether it's free tuition for people to upgrade their skills. Definitely.
No, that's really helpful. I guess one other idea that came out of that first panel around doing just that, you know, helping to advance more teachers in the field, was the idea of a micro-credential, which also was something that the council was considering, I know, in the response budget last year. And it sounds a little wonky, you know, but the basic concept is a way to help certify teachers, not in computer science. You know, we obviously have a need there as the states pass the computer science standards, but being able to integrate computational thinking throughout the K-12 system. So those K-8 educators that we heard so much about this morning already, a certification that would show I'm a third grade teacher that is certified in computing education, or a middle school science teacher, or humanities teacher. So I'm curious if you kind of see a similar argument there. Is that something that you think the council could support? Is there an argument there for investing in that kind of certification, not as a substitute for computer science certified teachers, but as a complement that, as we heard a little bit about from questions from the audience, might also extend to include after school, to include other ways that young people are reached by educators, like in our children's museums or science museums. Is that something you think might have some value? Is that something you could see the council supporting?
Absolutely, we would support that. We've done that in other areas. For example, I know there's shortage areas in special education, which teachers don't lose their tenures, actually is supplements. Because I did that I wanted to become an ESL teacher, so I just supplemented my Common Branch license with an ESL extension. So that would be the same pathway, and those would create more teachers that are certified Common Branch and an extension in computing. So it can be done. It's been done before. So UFT should get on board. This is a win-win for everyone involved.
No, that's great. Well, let me ask you one bigger picture question, and we'll turn it over to our audience. No, I think it'll be right in your wheelhouse. You know, we were talking about where we are now after 8 years, almost 9 years of computer science for all. We've seen the data that shows the increases, from about 5% of students participating in computer science, 8 years ago to 18% today. We see, as I just mentioned earlier, though, the continuing gaps. I'm curious, as you think about what the City Council would like to see as part of a Computer Science for All 2.0, the next iteration of this type of an initiative, or an expansion or extension of it. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, what some of those ingredients might be, but what would you propose, or what would you like to see the city run with as the next iteration or generation of Computer Science for All? And what are a couple of things you think that the council might be able to do to help get there?
You just gave one, adding an extension to already an existing license. That's one way to create a pathway. Incentives for people to join, teacher training. Don't leave teachers out there trying to figure it out on their own. Support matters, right? If I feel supported, I'm going to do 1,000 times better. Engaging in what needs to be taught, and show them the pathway to teaching what needs to be taught. And I think the council would support an expansion and also increasing the numbers. 18%, we got a lot of work to do. If we're only at 18% and we're celebrating 10 years later, we got a lot of work to do. So in probably assessing, we also have to assess what's working, what's not working, where can we tweak it, where can we make it better? Is it perfect? No, but it's a roadmap, right? Roadmaps are something we build on, and I think we should create a roadmap to where we're going. For example, I have a roadmap on early childhood. I have a roadmap on mental health. So maybe we need to set some goals in order to reach it. We can't do everything at once, but we look at the whole picture, like you said, the big picture, and then start looking at subdivisions and how can we start, one, preparing our teachers, creating pathways for our teachers to get certified and can use both of their, whether it's Common Branch and computing or whatever it is, and then continue to build from there.
That's really helpful. Well, let me turn it over then to our audience for some questions. I know there'll be some in the room. Same rules as before. Hands up. Let me know if you have a question. Your name, affiliation. Please do keep them brief. And online questions are welcome as well. So yeah, we'll go right to the middle. Your microphone's coming right there. Then we'll head to the back of the room next. Yep, see the hands up. And we'll go from there.
Hi.
Hi.
You're not our representative. We're right next door. We're in Prospect Heights. But I do want to say that Medgar Evers would be very lucky to have support of the CITE program if you were part of supporting CITE. So just a little plug.
Just a little plug for Medgar Evers. I love it. I love
Yes.
Dr. Ramsey. That's a
Yes.
conversation we can have with Dr. Ramsey.
Absolutely.
That would be a great, and it's right there in community and
Absolutely.
accessible to all. It's
Yeah.
in the center of Crown Heights.
She has been very supportive of computer education. So
Yes, she
just
is.
a little plug
She
for
is.
that.
Thank you. Plug for Medgar Evers CUNY.
That's great. So we'll go to the back of the room. I see two questions actually, but I'll start on the right. Great. Thank you.
Oh, hi. My name's Nelson Abbott. I'm with NPower. We're a local workforce development
You're good, yeah.
org, and work to connect people to technology jobs. So as Ron was saying, we're kind of at near the tail end of that funnel that he was describing earlier. We have a lot of people in the room that are all facing, if not moving, in the same direction on this topic. And so my question is, and I think about when Amazon was going to come to Long Island City, and they were promising all these jobs, but didn't seem very unclear about their commitment to hiring locally, right? Like that's the end goal of all this, right? Is these 100,000 jobs with six-figure salaries, but are we producing enough students and talent that are going to be in demand to hire? So what, if any, work is being done or can be done to leverage our collective bargaining power to hold the employers accountable to hire these students that we're trying to prepare for this future job market?
One thing I would say is, are we also talking to corporation to find out what are they looking for? I could train one person and that's not what the company's looking for. So maybe these strategic partnership, starting early conversation with corporate to find out what are you looking for? And then we can work from there and make sure you have that trained workforce to make sure we're meeting the moment.
So actually, it was a second hand in the back. I just want to respect, that was move in that direction, and we'll come to the other side of the room. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Good morning. I'm George Nunez, founder and CEO of Bronx Tech Hub, building the tech ecosystem in the Bronx, focused on workforce development, education, entrepreneurial access. Love the work that you're doing, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
My question to you is, how do you think politics, policy, and even the DOE rather can catch up to tech and what's going on in tech, right? Obviously, it takes time for things to get passed and things to move in the right direction, but how do you think that catches up with the ever-revolving door of what's going on in tech? The other panelists have mentioned, today's AI, ML, next is quantum, next is AGI, so how do you, or what advice would you give, rather, in regards to that perspective?
We got to stay on top of technology and make sure we're engaged in it, right? So we shouldn't be afraid of it. Most folks were afraid of AI. Oh my God, it's going to be used properly and used in different settings. I think that it's very useful. It will not take away teachers' jobs, ever. I always want a human in front of me, but having teachers trained to use it is an extra tool for me. And it also have students engaged, right? Students are engaged if they can prepare their own lesson. It's a crutch. It's not make sure they know that this is not a giveaway, you're always going to use it. But for example, students with special need can benefit from different entry points in the lesson using whatever form of technology we're using. So I think we just got to train and stay with the moment because it's moving really fast. We just have to catch up. We have to stay on course so we can stay in the moment and not let it get away from us. So that would be one of my advices.
Thanks, council member. So we've got a question right here on the left. Oh, sorry, yeah. Start there, and then we'll head to the back again.
I'm petite, so I have to stand up.
Thank you.
I'm Jallery, CEO from String Technologies. We are a platform that has STEM courses for kids with disabilities and bilingual for learners. My question is, how is the best pathway to support kids that are underrepresented and also special needs to fill in that gap in career pathways in STEM as well? Like, what could the Department of Education pathway in order to bring more access to these kids? And what would be the best needs that we could approach in measuring the data to ensure those best results?
Thank you. I'm data driven. I'm a data nerd. Data always drive policy. And even when I was an educator, it drove my instruction in the classroom. That's a work in progress with our students and special needs. And that's a niche that I'm working with New York City Public Schools to make sure that by the time they leave our system, whether it's a student in D75, they're able to navigate our city. And those tools can be very helpful. Independent living, they're not all built out the way they should be, but it's a work in progress. And I'm working with New York City Public Schools to make sure we're investing in special students with special needs and also our multi-language learners, right? They need those supports in place, one to acquire language, one with our students with special needs to be able to navigate that space. So that's a work in progress. I did a hearing recently and I have a commitment that this is a work in progress when it comes to our students in special need. We cannot leave them behind. We have to make sure they're also here in this moment, but having the right tools in their toolbox.
That's great, thank you. So question, all the way in the back. Microphone's coming your way. Thank you.
Hi, Greg Mateo with CareerWise New York. I guess my question is, everyone's here for the same reason. We all believe in tech and advancing sort of our young people, but it feels like a bit of a echo chamber. How would you advise nonprofits like us, other educators to move the conversation for people who are less warm, who are perhaps a little reluctant to prioritize technology and investing the way that we're all talking about. Because if it was, you know, I don't think we wouldn't be here, right? So how would you advise us, anyone here in this room, to really reach out to those people who are perhaps a little less eager, you know, more reluctant in this space?
Bring them into the rooms and have those hard conversations, right? We have to have those hard conversations. Bring them into the room. And when we talk about young people, too, we also have to have them at the table when we make decisions for them, but not with them. And I hear that a lot from young people, right? They always want to decide for us. Young people should also be in that room to have the conversation, but I would start with a conversation, have a roundtable with those and show them what you're seeing. Maybe they don't see it that way. Bring them into the room and have those hard conversations about, this is what we're seeing, and if we invest this is where we're gonna go. So if they don't see it, they won't believe in it, right? Some people, I always believe learners are visual, that people that are visual learners, they gotta see it in order to believe in it and invest in it. So I would bring people around the room. Recently I did a AI summit, and it was a lot of young people who came. They talked about it's with Lumi. Lumi's a self-publishing by Colin Kaepernick. He has a AI platform as well. And young people wanted to publish their books, but they said, I don't want to go to a publisher. This AI platform exists. I want to start publishing my books from there. So it also has to show and engage folks. Conversations, not on the first time, but maybe the second or third time you get them to convince them. And then start, weeding out those who can come on your side and start working with them and continue to invite those who are still on the fence. We're not quitters. We don't quit on tech.
I did the front row question. Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, question right here. Yeah.
Thank you. There we go.
There we go.
Sean Arnold, New York City Public Schools. So yours is a role that is even beyond the conversation of computer science and education, because you can speak to and address these sort of issues of inequities and policies that go even beyond the ones that exist in school to ones that are more societal, right? And so even to her question about the nature of meeting the needs of students with disabilities, meeting the needs of students of color, in which we've lacked in a world in which it seems there's going to be less funding and less national statements on helping people with disabilities and et cetera. And teacher burnout is increasing.
It's real.
How do we address the deep need for preparing young people for the future? Is it like a matter of mandates for the future, of like, this has to happen in CS in these places and the funding follows that? Are there laws that have to be passed at a citywide level or at a statewide level? Is that a thing that can happen?
The state can pass laws and mandate New York City public schools what to do. I can do resolutions. I can have a ton of hearings to do that. For example, one of the things she talked about, disabilities. Most folks don't know, most of our buildings are not ADA accessible. And what I called for was an investment of over $1 billion to get those buildings accessible. I only got $800 million. And I was told it would be done by 2030. So students who live in their neighborhoods who only have a mobility issue cannot attend their community schools because it's not accessible. So even from the very basic, just getting into that building, there's a barrier there. So we got to start removing some of those barriers we talked about in order to get young people into certain spaces. Visited schools. I visited school in Queens, and I still talk about it only because it bothers me so much. We went there. There was a ramp, and the ramp stopped, and the next way to get into the building were steps. And I was like, what are you thinking? Exactly. That's exactly how I felt. I was like, wait, are you serious? So even those things, and we talk about race in school. And in June, I'm going to have one of the hottest topics on a hearing. I'm going to talk about segregation in New York City public schools. And it is going to be what it is. And we're going to hear the data. And there's ways that we can invest in under-resourced schools, invest in early childhood. And that's one of the ways we can alleviate some of this segregation as well. Gotcha.
Thank you. So I saw one more question, in the third row, and then maybe all the time we have. Oh.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Brian Cohen from Beam Center. Nice to see you again.
Same here.
Council member. it does seem to me that there is an opportunity that the state is presenting for a roadmap, and that is the transformation in graduation requirements. And I haven't heard anyone talk about that as being a forcing mechanism for the big picture and making the roadmap. But it does seem to me that the question that it will ask is, what are we willing to give up? Because for all the wonderful things that were talked about in the panel and that you've mentioned, if we're going to have a CS class as a requirement in every school, we're going to have to give something up. And I'm wondering, has the conversation started at the New York City Public Schools or within the council about what we're willing to give up?
Great conversation to start with. I was over the weekend with Chancellor Young, and those are the conversations. And they're like, it's going to be project-based learning, which what a lot of people would want to see. And that would be great to integrate, make it mandatory for CS to be embedded in that new roadmap. So I'm for that, and I support that. And one of the things I was talking outside is physical. This week I put out a op-ed on social emotional learning that should be embedded in every curriculum, right? When we talk about mental, whether it's yoga, mindfulness around students, when we say let's educate the whole child, we also have to look at that component as well. As our students returned, with some of these new students we're seeing, they're coming with different challenges that we have never seen before. And how do we address that in order for them to move forward in doing reading and math? I want you to do reading and math, but if you're not all right, we can't do reading and math. And it's going to impact our schools and impact our... So if you get a chance, that's my shameless plug. Check out City Limits. I did an op-ed on incorporating mindfulness into our everyday curriculum.
All right, I think we're out of time, but can everybody join me in applauding Councilmember Joseph? Thank you again, Councilmember. I mean, I just want to say, Councilmember Joseph has been such a champion for CITE. Speaking of op-eds, and definitely check out the City Limits op-ed, but she also co-bylined an op-ed with Eli last year about CITE and about kind of why this is so important for our city. But also, let me just say, beyond just the great work that you've been doing as a champion in the council, we're just so proud and supportive of the council in general. And if you didn't see the speaker's speech yesterday, there were so many great education and higher ed proposals that the council is advancing there. So big thank you for that. Thanks to Robin Hood and Amber and all of your colleagues in the Technology and Learning Fund for their support and for your advocacy and really your drive to push these issues forward. And I just want to end with something that I started with. You know, my colleagues and I at the Center for a Number Future, we've really looked at this issue about tech and equity and diversity from a lot of different lenses, right? We know that there's not one thing that we need to be doing around expanding access to tech careers. We know we need to expand access to tech careers. It's so important for so many ways and so many reasons. But as we've looked at all these things, we have to invest in training for adults. We have to be doing apprenticeships. We need to involve CUNY and programs like CUNY 2X Tech. But we've found in our research that probably the single greatest investment that the city can make is around training our future teachers and really kind of making a difference for those folks in the K through 12 schools. That's really going to set us on this course that we need in New York to have a much more diverse and equitable tech sector. And this is a sector that's going to continue to drive growth for years to come. So we hope that we can kind of get more of our policymakers like Councilmember Joseph to really understand how important this is and how it's such a small investment that's really needed. But thanks for bearing with me as I kind of gave this like long-winded speech about this. But stay tuned. We are going to be doing more work, and I said in the next couple of weeks we're going to be publishing a new study about CITE. We're also going to be doing a report about the state's role in bolstering computing education in New York. So thanks so much for coming, and stay tuned. Take care.
Thank you.